We got to talk about something that you and I have not spent any time talking about. And I know you've been traveling, so you may not have even had a chance to check and see what all's in the format for our show today. Because, truth be told, we have a little research team that puts together a lot of research in order to help us pull these shows together. And we're going to be talking about somebody who I shouldn't say I know, I don't believe you're a huge fan of. I'm talking about the real life Todd Clem. We know him as Bubba the Love Sponge, and he gets himself fired by Dixie Carter. And it's because he did a radio interview where he ambushed a wrestler who performed under the name Awesome Kong on his radio show in Tampa. Bubba the Love Sponge used to have a huge syndicated network of radio stations, and then eventually he made the leap to Sirius XM, and now he's back in terrestrial radio. And in this era, he was doing some stuff with TNA. I guess he too had been Jimmy Harted into the deal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was a little different situation though, because Bubba he brought a massive radio footprint to the table. He wasn't just there because he was a buddy of Hulk's. That was a part of it, no question. But there was a massive amount of added value for a young company struggling to get attention.
He was known for doing stunts, and he's going to do a stunt here with Awesome Kong, I guess. And I don't know all the particulars. They had some sort of a run-in at television, and now he's going to air it out on the radio. And that is a page right out of his and Howard Stern's book. They want to be authentic. They want to talk about what's really going on in their life on the radio, warts and all. And this just gets ugly, where they have her, and I don't even know that she knows this is happening, discussing how much money she's making and where she's moving and all this stuff. And then Bubba jumps in on the interview and starts calling her names. Lots of unpleasant names. We're not going to repeat them all, but he even uses one where it's like, wow, I don't think you should be doing that. Dixie felt the same way. And 2 days later, she's fired. Not she's fired. He's fired. Bubba the Love Sponge gets his walking papers 2 days after this outburst, where he is challenging Awesome Kong to a fight. And he's saying that he's going to put up $5,000 and he's going to give the money to Haiti, who just had a huge natural disaster that was clearly something they had discussed in real life. She's frustrated, hangs up the phone. It was a gotcha deal. I'm sure Bubba thought this will make for great radio. And if you were a fan of that program, it probably did. But he clearly went about this the wrong way. And I'm sure you're sort of in the middle of this. You weren't in the studio. It's not like you're even listening to the program. You don't live in Tampa. But when you hear about this, I'm sure you've got to do some cleanup somewhere with relationships and hurt feelings, because this is Hulk's buddy. Talk to me about this whole Bubba the Love Sponge, Awesome Kong situation.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't get in the middle of it. It was Hulk's. Yeah, the relationship obviously was with Hulk and Bubba, and Hulk did Bubba's show. In fact, I used to cringe. I'd be in LA. I'd be, on business in between meetings, and I'm listening. Sometimes I had to pull over on the side of the road because I don't think Hulk would mind if I say this. I think he's pretty much admitted to a lot of this. He was drinking really heavy. Again, this was during that time when he was undergoing the back surgeries, the issue with his son, the divorce, all of this. I'm not making excuses. It just was real.
Yeah.
He was medicated, by his doctors, legitimate prescriptions for shit that would kill a horse or two. And he would top it off with a quart of Tito's in the morning on the way to the studio, Bubba's. So there were often times when I'd pull over on the side of the road and I'm hearing, and Bubba's feeding it. Of course, this is great radio for Bubba. Hulk wasn't himself. His judgment was definitely impaired between the pharmaceuticals and the alcohol and just the stress and the drama and the pain and all the rest of it. He was not thinking clearly at all. He was not himself. And he was saying and doing things on the radio that I just knew a year or two before that, he would never, ever say or do. But it was like Bubba's radio show was his voice. It was a way for him to lash out. It was a way for him to respond to people, including his ex-wife, who was just running her mouth at every opportunity and doing whatever she could to embarrass and humiliate him. And Bubba provided a platform for Hulk to respond. And he did on a regular basis. And it hurt him. It hurt his reputation. I think it hurt the perception of people had of him. And again, if that was really who he was, yeah, that's what you get. But he was not. Bubba was taking advantage of him, in my opinion, exploiting him by being his friend or convincing him that Bubba was his best buddy, and then allowing him to go on the radio for Bubba's benefit and say things and embarrass himself in ways that he should have, Bubba, if he was really a friend, would have never, ever, ever let him do. I couldn't do anything about it. I tried to talk to Hulk a couple times, but no, brother, this was his opportunity to vent. And Bubba had a huge footprint. He was right up there with Howard Stern for a while. He was part of Howard Stern's network. So I just kind of stepped back and let whatever happened happen. I wasn't emotionally involved in it. I wasn't technically involved in it. It wasn't part of my job to manage Bubba the Love Sponge or what he did or said. But it was a horrible situation. Didn't it end up? Didn't she beat his ass?
Well, that's what started it. There was a physical confrontation, and then he attacks her on the radio like this, and
yeah, because he embarrassed the hell out of him.
Yes,
I think she'd have kicked his ass. Quite honestly, if they'd have let it go.
Well, that's the reason they got to this whole, hey, let's have a fight. I'll come to your place right now. And she's even giving her address over the radio. And as the producer is saying, oh, well, just go down there and take care of it then. Y'all go fight. Think about the absurdity of that, a man and a woman fighting, or just adult humans fight. What are we doing? But then as if that's not enough, he doubles down on some of the, oh, he shouldn't say that, where he goes, oh, I don't want to go to the hood. So then he gets fired 2 days later. Dixie sends him an email saying that they have a 0 tolerance policy for racial insensitivity, and he's shown the door. And he goes on a rant and calls Dixie a mark bitch on the radio and says that he's made sure that he's thoroughly buried Awesome Kong to Johnny Ace, and there's no way WWE will take her. And he even shares some uncomfortable details that Terry Taylor had told him in confidence about some issues Awesome Kong had been having mentally or emotionally. He's airing all of this out and saying the TNA product is beneath me anyway. And it's not like this is going to hurt any of your sponsors because nobody wants to advertise with such a horrible product. Nobody's even going to notice. I was doing you a favor. That is the attitude in all of this. And just knowing that you're supposed to be the Hulk Hogan whisperer for whatever reason, however we want to call that, and knowing this is his friend, this puts Hulk in a bad spot here too. And I don't think Bubba even considered that when he was doing any of this. Do you?
Absolutely not. Bubba's only concern was Bubba. That's why he was putting what, like I said, convinced Hulk that he was, one of his best friends, and then just allowing him to go on his radio show and say things and do things that were put Hulk in a bad light. But he didn't care. He let him do it. He encouraged him to do it. He fired him up. He stirred the pot. He made sure he got a great show out of it, regardless of how it affected anybody else.
Once upon a time when Bubba was on satellite radio, I mean, I didn't listen all the time. I've always been a Howard Stern guy, but there were segments that I enjoyed on Bubba's radio show. I've never met him. I don't know him at all, but this is a bad look. Do you have, I know that there's a lot of people who just don't like anything about Bubba the Love Sponge, and I understand that. I mean, that's part of the character he's played. It's probably well earned. Was there ever a time where you and Bubba were friendly? I mean, I understand the ultimate falling out with him and Hulk and where you landed on that whole deal. But at any point, were you friendly with Bubba the Love Sponge before things got sideways?
Friendly, yes. Friends, no. Meaning, because he was tight with Hulk, because Hulk spent a lot of time with him. I would go down to Tampa, and if I was with Hulk for 3 or 4 days, whatever it was, inevitably there was a trip at least once or twice down to the radio station or the studio where Bubba worked and had his business. And yeah, I was around it, and Bubba had some talented guys working with him that I found to be fun and entertaining to be around. So I was friendly with him, but I never associated with him outside of his studio. We didn't have a phone relationship. We didn't text each other back and forth. It was simply, he's a friend of a friend. So, a friend of a friend, I guess, is a friend of mine, so to speak.